The lake was quiet that evening, the kind of stillness that felt almost sacred. James Riley leaned back in his old wooden chair on the dock, boots resting against the planks he had hammered in himself more than 20 years ago. The boards creaked beneath his weight, worn but sturdy like him. He wasn't a rich man compared to his neighbors, but this dock, this little stretch of water, was his piece of heaven. Beside him sat Emily, his 15-year-old daughter, sketchbook open on her lap. She was drawing the sun melting into the horizon, the fiery orange glow turning the lake into a sheet of liquid gold. Almost perfect, she murmured, shading a corner. James smiled, watching her. Almost, she grinned. Well, it'd be perfect if Mom were here too. A silence fell. James's smile faded into something softer, sadder. His late wife Sarah had loved this dock more than anyone. Every brush stroke of paint on the railing still bore her memory. Before James could respond, the sound of tires crunching over gravel broke the peace. Both turned their heads. A shiny black SUV pulled up on the road above. Out stepped a woman in a tailored suit and heels far too sharp for the lakeside dirt. Karen Dalton, president of the Maple Shore Estates HOA, 52 years old, self-appointed queen of the lakefront. She strutted down the slope like she owned it, clipboard in hand. Her short blonde bob didn't move in the wind, as if it too refused to disobey her. Evening, Riley, she called, voice sweet with venom. Lovely night, isn't it? James stood, already bracing for the fight. What do you want, Karen? Her eyes scanned the dock like a vulture circling prey. This little structure, it's out of compliance. James folded his arms. It's been here 20 years, built it myself. Never had a problem until you came along. Karen smiled thinly. The board has updated our standards. Maple Shore is an exclusive community, James. We can't have rustic eyesores lowering property values. Emily shot her a glare. It's not an eyesore, it's history. Karen crouched slightly to Emily's level, voice dripping with false kindness. Sweetheart, rules are rules. Someday you'll understand. James stepped closer, his shadow falling across Karen. The dock stays. Her smirk widened as she scribbled something on a clipboard. We'll see. She pivoted, heels clicking, and strode back to her SUV. The silence she left behind was heavier than before. Emily's fists were balled. I hate her, James put a hand on her shoulder. Hating her gives her power. We don't give her that. But even as he said it, James felt the storm brewing. Karen didn't threaten, she promised. The next morning, James woke to the sound of machinery. He bolted upright, heart thundering. Outside, on the shoreline, a demolition crew was setting up. Yellow caution tape cordoned off his dock, and standing in the middle of it all, sipping coffee like a monarch surveying her kingdom, was Karen. James stormed down the hill, Emily right behind him. What the hell is this? He demanded. Karen lowered her sunglasses. Board-approved demolition. You were given notice. Notice, James barked. You shoved threats in my mailbox. Not notice. She gave a mocking shrug. Call it what you like. This dock is coming down today. James stepped in front of the workers, planting himself between them and the wood. His voice was calm, but iron hard. You lay one hand on it, and we'll have a different kind of problem. The crew hesitated. These weren't men paid enough to fight a furious homeowner. They glanced at Karen nervously. Karen's smile faltered, then hardened. Fine. Play your little games, Riley, but understand this Maple Shore has rules. Break them, and I will break you. She spun on her heel, signaling the workers to pack up. The engines quieted, but the threat hung in the air like smoke. Emily looked up at her father, fear in her eyes. She's not stopping, is she? James stared out at the dock, fists clenched. No, he said softly. She's just getting started. That night, long after Emily was asleep, James sat alone on the dock. The moonlight silvered the water, and the boards beneath his palms seemed to whisper with memories. His wife's laughter, Emily's first steps, quiet mornings with a fishing pole. Karen thought this was just wood. She didn't understand. This dock was life, family, legacy. James lifted his gaze to the far end of the lake. Across the water, expensive mansions glittered with light, monuments to wealth and arrogance, and somewhere beyond them, hidden deep in the wooded hills, he knew, lay the old Floodgates, part of the original dam system built long before the HOA even existed. Most had forgotten about them, but not James. As a civil engineer, he knew the lake better than anyone. He knew its veins, its secrets, its weaknesses, and in that moment, staring across the dark water, a thought flickered, a dangerous thought. If Karen wanted war, he could give her one. The morning after Karen's attempted demolition, James barely slept. Every creak of the house felt like a warning. Every shadow out by the lake seemed to move. He sat at the kitchen table long before dawn, nursing a mug of black coffee, staring at the water through the window. Emily padded in, rubbing her eyes. She was wrapped in her blanket like a shield. You didn't sleep, she said softly. James shook his head. Didn't feel like it. She slid into the chair across from him. She'll be back, won't she? Yeah, James admitted, the word heavy. She'll be back. And next time, she won't come with just a clipboard. Emily frowned at her untouched cereal. Why does she hate us so much? It's just a dock. James leaned back, eyes hard. It's never just a dock. Karen hates anything she can't control, and right now, we're the only ones who ever tell her no. Later that day, James got a taste of how far Karen's reach extended. When he walked out to grab the mail, a bright yellow envelope sat in the box. Notice of violation was stamped in red across the top. Inside was a list of supposed infractions. Dock not up to community code. Exterior paint faded. Lawn length exceeds regulation. James snorted. His lawn was trimmed better than most golf courses. This was Karen's handwriting, her vendetta printed on paper by the time he reached the bottom. The fine totaled $1,250. Emily came out onto the porch. What's that? James crumpled the notice in his fist. Extortion. At the community market, the whispers started. Neighbors he'd once fished with, shared beers with, now avoided his eyes. Some gave sympathetic glances, others looked almost relieved, as if glad it wasn't them in Karen's crosshairs. But one man stopped him. Tom Harkins, mid-60s, a retired city worker with a limp. He leaned heavily on his cane, eyes sharp beneath his baseball cap. Heard about the dock, Tom muttered. James stiffened. Word travels fast. Everything travels fast when stirring the pot. Tom glanced around before lowering his voice. Watch yourself, Riley. She doesn't fight fair. Had a neighbor down the road forced to sell after she bled him with fines. James narrowed his eyes. You ever fight back? Tom gave a dry laugh. Tried. Didn't have the fight left in me. But you, his gaze hardened. You look like you do. That evening, James spread out old maps on the dining table. They were yellowed, edges frayed but still clear. Lake Alder Project 1954 was stamped in faded ink. His engineer's training kicked in as his eyes traced the system. Dams, floodgates, release valves, a whole network forgotten by time. Emily leaned over his shoulder. What's that? The lake, James said simply. She frowned. To mean, what's all the lines? Control systems, he explained. Back when the dam was built, they designed a floodgate to release water in case levels got too high. Most people don't even know it's there anymore. Emily blinked. You mean you could drain the lake? James looked at her. For a moment, he saw Sarah in her daughter's face, the same sharp eyes, the same spark of curiosity. Not drain it, James said slowly, but open the wrong gate at the wrong time, and you'd flood everything built too close to the shore. Emily's eyes widened. Like Karen's house. James didn't answer. He didn't need to. The thought had already taken root. The next week was war by paper cuts, more violation notices, more fines. Karen even had the audacity to show up during Emily's walk home from school, pretending to offer advice about how a family should fit in. James confronted her at the curb. Stay away from my daughter. Karen smiled like a snake. Teach her respect, James. Otherwise she'd grow up thinking the rules don't apply to her. James stepped closer, voice low. You've made this personal. That's your mistake. Karen's smile faltered just enough to show a flicker of unease, but she recovered quickly, heels clicking as she strode away. That night, James sat on the dock again. The water lapped quietly, calm, oblivious to the storm brewing above it. His dock was still standing for now, but Karen would be back, and when she came, she'd come hard. He could feel it. The floodgates whispered at the back of his mind. He tried to push the thought away, but it clung to him like the humidity in the air. Maybe Tom was right. Maybe this wasn't a fight you won by playing fair. James looked at Emily's sketches scattered on the dock beside him. Her drawings of sunsets, boats, the dock they'd both loved. He closed his eyes. Karen thought she could erase their history. With a bulldozer, she thought power came from titles and threats. But James knew something she didn't. Real power lay in what you were willing to risk, and if she wanted a war, he'd give her one. By the third week, Karen's war had escalated from paper fines to public humiliation. On a bright Saturday morning, the neighborhood gathered for the HOA's community cleanup day. Families in matching t-shirts hauled bags of leaves and trimmed hedges, pretending they enjoyed it. A table of cookies and lemonade sat in the shade, all under the watchful eye of Karen Dalton, Queen of Maple Shore. James hadn't planned to show up, but Emily convinced him. If we don't go, she'll say we don't contribute. She'll reasoned. So here he was, raking the strip of grass in front of his house, sweat dripping down his neck, while Karen strutted up and down the street with her clipboard like a general inspecting soldiers. Keep it neat, folks. Remember, appearance is everything, she barked. When she reached James's yard, she stopped. He could feel her shadow before he looked up. Still haven't painted that trim, she said. Voice sweet but sharp. James wiped his forehead with the back of his hand. I'll get to it. Karen leaned closer. Or maybe you won't, and maybe if the board votes, you'll lose this house altogether. Wouldn't that be tragic? Emily, kneeling nearby, froze. James's hands tightened on the rake handle. He wanted to snap it in half and shove it back at her. Instead, he met her eyes. You really think this neighborhood's better off with you terrorizing everyone? Karen smiled thinly. It's not about better, James. It's about control. You've already lost. She turned, heels clicking, leaving him fuming in the heat. That night, James couldn't stop replaying the words in his head. It's about control. She was right. Every notice, every fine, every smug smile, it was all about reminding him who held the leash. And if he didn't find a way to cut it, she'd strangle him and Emily with it. He spread out the old maps again. His finger traced the lines that most people would never notice, the narrow tunnels beneath the dam, the rusted floodgates. He remembered working on similar systems in his younger years. He knew how fragile they could be. If he could get down there, if he could test the gears, the thought sent a shiver down his spine. It was madness, dangerous, possibly criminal, but it was also freedom. The next day, James called Tom. "You used to work for the city," James said. "You know anything about the dam?" Tom chuckled. "More than Karen ever will. The place is older than half the houses here." "Why?" James hesitated. He wasn't ready to reveal the full plan. "Just curious. I was looking at old maps." There was a pause on the other end. Then Tom said, voice low, "Be careful, Riley. You poke around down there, you'll find trouble. Some of those gates haven't been touched in decades. But if you're serious, I know a way in." James's pulse quickened. "Tell me." That evening, under cover of darkness, Tom met James by the tree line at the far end of the lake. Emily begged to come, but James told her no, not yet. Tom led him down a narrow, overgrown path. The air smelled of damp earth and rust. Finally, they reached a squat concrete structure half buried in vines, the old maintenance shed. Tom fished out a key from his pocket. "Don't ask how I still got this," he muttered. The lock clicked open, the door groaning on its hinges. Inside was darkness thick with dust. Their flashlights cut across forgotten tools, broken ladders, and the gaping mouth of a tunnel sloping down into the earth. James's breath caught. He could feel the weight of the lake pressing above them, the thrum of water echoing faintly in the walls. "This leads to the main valve chamber," Tom explained. "Last time I saw it was maybe 15 years ago. Half the machinery's probably rusted through." James's mind raced. "But it still works." Tom shrugged. "Maybe, but if you're thinking what I think you're thinking." He stopped, studying James's face. "You planning to drown Karen?" James didn't answer. Tom sighed. "Damn, I thought so." The chamber was vast, a cathedral of concrete and steel buried beneath the earth. Their flashlight beams danced across giant rusted wheels, chains hanging, like the ribs of some dead beast. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling. James ran his hand along one of the wheels. "She doesn't even know this exists." Tom shifted uneasily. "There's a reason they locked it up. Too much power in the wrong hands." James turned, eyes hard. "Or the right hands." When James got home, Emily was waiting on the porch. "Where were you?" she asked. "Out with Tom," James said. Her eyes narrowed. "You went to the dam, didn't you?" He froze. "How did you?" "I saw the maps on the table." "Dad, what are you doing?" James looked at her for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "Making sure people like Karen don't get to win." Emily's face paled. You're not gonna flood the houses, are you?" James didn't answer right away. Finally he crouched in front of her, voice steady. "Sometimes bullies don't stop until you show them what real power looks like. I won't let her take this place from us. I won't." Emily swallowed hard. "But what if it hurts other people?" James put a hand on her shoulder. "The only people in the floodplain are the ones who let Karen run this place. They chose her, they protected her, and now they'll pay the price." Emily looked away, torn. She wanted to believe in her father. She wanted to trust him. But in her gut she felt a storm building and she wasn't sure anyone would come out of it unharmed. The following week, James thought the storm might cool. Maybe Karen had grown tired of her games. But peace in Maple Shore was always an illusion, and Karen never tired. On Wednesday morning, James came home from a job site to find his mailbox stuffed with envelopes, not one or two, but a whole stack of HOA violation notices. He carried them inside and dumped them on the kitchen table. Emily stared wide-eyed. "What is all that?" James tore one open. Then another. And another. Each was more ridiculous than the last. Improper driveway, gravel color. Unauthorized mailbox. Design, dock structure remains non-compliant. Unapproved curtains visible from exterior. By the time he finished, the fines totaled over $7,000. Emily gasped. "Dad, they can't do that, can they?" James's jaw tightened. "Oh, they can. That's their game." And then came the final notice, tucked at the bottom of the pile. "Intent to foreclose." Emily snatched it from his hands, reading the bold letters. "They're trying to take our house." James sat heavily in his chair. His pulse thundered, but his face was calm. "That's her endgame. Bleed us until we can't pay. Force us out. Replace us with someone who fits her picture-perfect fantasy." Emily's eyes filled with tears. "This isn't fair." James reached across the table, gripping her hand. "That's why we don't play fair back." That evening, the HOA held its monthly board meeting. James went, not because he expected fairness, but because he wanted to look Karen in the eye. The meeting was held in the glittering Dalton house, a gaudy palace of glass and marble overlooking the water. Inside, half the neighborhood was crammed into the living room. Platters of catered food lined the counters, untouched. Karen stood at the front, flanked by her loyal board members. She wore a red blazer that made her look like a general. "Tonight," she announced, "we address the matter of Mr. James Riley's continued violations, a murmur rippled through the crowd. Some neighbors glanced at James with pity. Others looked away, afraid. Karen gestured to a screen where photos of his house appeared. His lawn, his dock, even his windows, each marked with red circles like evidence in a trial. As you can all see, Karen continued, Mr. Riley has consistently refused to maintain standards. The board has no choice but to pursue foreclosure proceedings. Gasps filled the room. Emily, sitting beside her father, gripped his arm. James stood slowly. This is a sham. You're inventing violations out of thin air. Karen's smile was sharp as glass. The board's decision is final. James scanned the faces around him. He saw guilt in some, fear in most, but no one spoke up. He turned back to Karen. You're not just destroying my home, you're destroying this community. Karen leaned forward, her voice dripping with triumph. Oh, James, communities are built on obedience. You should have learned that. The room fell silent. James sat back down, his anger boiling so hot it felt cold. Emily whispered, Dad, but he didn't answer. In that moment the decision was made. The floodgates were no longer just an idea, they were destiny. That night, James returned to the dam alone. He carried a heavy-duty flashlight, gloves, and a tool bag slung over his shoulder. The forest was alive with crickets, but inside the concrete tunnels, the only sound was dripping water and the echo of his footsteps. When he reached the valve chamber, he stopped. The rusted wheels loomed before him, giants asleep in the dark. He placed his hand on the cold metal, and for a moment it felt like shaking hands with fate. He pulled a wrench from his bag and tested the first wheel. It groaned, unmoving at first, then gave a reluctant screech as it shifted. Dust rained from the ceiling. The sound echoed like thunder. James worked steadily, sweat beading his forehead. Slowly, the wheel turned. He could feel the pressure behind it, the force of the lake pressing against iron and concrete. It was alive, waiting. Finally, he stepped back, chest heaving. It was possible. He could do it. In the silence that followed, he whispered, She wants control. Let's see how she likes losing everything. But back at the house, Emily was waiting. She sat on the porch swing, arms crossed, eyes fierce. You were there, weren't you? She demanded as he walked up. James hesitated. Where? Damn, Emily shot back. Don't lie to me. James sighed. He sank onto the step beside her. Emily, I need you to trust me. I do, she said quickly, but you're scaring me. This isn't like you. He looked at her. Really looked the way Sarah's eyes lived on in their daughter. His chest ached. Sometimes, James said softly, a man has to do something he never thought he'd do, to protect the people he loves. Emily's voice cracked, even if it means hurting everyone else. James didn't answer. He could single quotes T. Instead, he pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. Go to bed, Em, I'll handle this. But as he stared out at the dark water, his mind was already deep in the tunnels, already turning the wheels that would bring Karen's empire crashing down. The lake was gone, where crystal water once shimmered under the sun. There was now only mud, debris, and the jagged skeletons of drowned docks. Shattered boats jutted out like broken bones, and along the shoreline, the pride of Maple Shore Estates, the million-dollar mansions, sagged like wounded beasts. Their foundations cracked, their lawns buried under thick layers of silt. It had taken less than a night. The floodgates, once ignored and rusting in the dark, had awakened with a groan, and when James opened them fully, Alder Lake had surged out like a beast set free. Karen's empire had drowned in its own arrogance. Reporters swarmed the community now. Their vans, parked on cracked driveways, drones buzzed overhead, filming the devastation. The HOA board had collapsed, its members bickering and fleeing as lawsuits mounted. Karen Dalton herself sat alone on the ruins of her marble patio, her once perfect red blazer now mud-stained and torn. The woman who had strutted through the neighborhood with a clipboard now stared at the wasteland with empty eyes. James stood on the opposite bank with Emily at his side. They had packed their few belongings into the truck that morning. There was nothing left for them here. Emily broke the silence first. Do you feel better? James didn't answer right away. He looked at Karen across the ruined lake. He thought of every threat, every fine, every humiliation. He thought of Sarah and the dock they had built together. He thought of Emily's tears the night Karen announced foreclosure. And then he thought of this, the wreckage, the innocent families who had chosen silence over defiance, now paying for it all. Finally he said, voice low, I feel finished. Emily turned to him, searching his face. Was it worth it? James exhaled, shoulders heavy. Karen needed to be stopped. But maybe, he trailed off. Maybe I became as ruthless as she was. Emily slipped her hand into his. You didn't. She destroyed people for power. You fought back to survive. He squeezed her hand, grateful for her clarity. Across the lake, Karen suddenly shouted, voice hoarse, cracking through the air. This isn't over, Riley. I'll rebuild. You hear me? Her voice broke into sobs. The sound echoed weakly across the empty basin. A queen screaming from the throne of ruins. James shook his head. It's already over, Kieran. You just don't know it yet. They climbed into the truck. Emily leaned her head against the window, watching the destroyed lake vanish behind them as the road curved away. James drove in silence, the weight of what he'd done pressing on him, but for the first time in years, he felt a strange kind of peace. Not joy, not triumph, but freedom. As they reached the highway, Emily whispered, "Where will we go?" James glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Anywhere that doesn't have an HOA." They both laughed, tired but real, the sound carrying them forward. Narrator VO. In the end, Karen never rebuilt her empire. Without her army of rules and fines, she was just another bitter voice shouting into the wind. The homes rotted, the community dissolved, and Alder Lake became a cautionary tale. But for me and Emily, it was a new beginning, because sometimes, to protect what you love, you have to open the floodgates and let the past sink.